So welcome everyone. Welcome to the Battle for Berkeley. You are in the right place. This is a conversation with huge stakes, not just for the city of Berkeley, but for the future of this country and indeed for all of humanity. As most of you probably know, over the last few months, Berkeley has been ground zero of a fascist assault, starting with Milo Yiannopoulos, the person that was banned from Twitter for inciting campaigns of racist and misogynist hatred. And then there was David Horowitz, who has said things like black people should be grateful for slavery. There was Coulter, who thinks that immigration is a form of is leading to white genocide. But along with these intellectual operatives for the Trump regime that have targeted UC Berkeley, twice in April, hundreds of ready-to-brawl, alt-right, white supremacists, neo-Nazis, bikers, militia have rallied in Martin Luther King Park in downtown Berkeley. They are targeting Berkeley exactly because of its radical legacy, exactly because it is a center of multiculturalism, of progressive thinking. And if they can make Berkeley bow down, if they can make Berkeley bow down, they will be greatly strengthened in their efforts to normalize fascism in this country as a whole. They are claiming the legacy of the free speech movement and claiming that they are the victims, that their speech, that their freedom of speech is being suppressed. This is nonsense, and you'll hear more about that tonight. But we have the great opportunity tonight to hear a view that you will not hear in the mainstream media. Sunsara Taylor, speaking on the theme of why it is right and righteous to drive fascists off of the campus, out of Berkeley, and out of power. This is a talk and a challenge to debate. If you don't know who Sunsara Taylor is, you should get to know Sunsara Taylor. This is a talk, and then there will be a Q&A. You'll have a chance during the Q&A to raise whatever questions you want to raise. After she's done talking, you'll have plenty of opportunity. I'm also going to ask anyone who has not been authorized to film or to take pictures, please don't take film or pictures. Okay, Sunsara Taylor, if you don't know who she is an amazing revolutionary. She's a revolutionary communist. She's a follower of the revolutionary communist leader Bob Avakian, who's the architect of a whole new synthesis of communism and the leader of a movement for revolution right now in this country. And who, by the way, also is an alumni of UC Berkeley and a veteran of the free speech, an active participant in the free speech movement back in the 60s. Sunsara Taylor is someone that has been on the front lines and a leader in the fight for women's liberation as part of the fight for the emancipation of humanity as a whole. And in particular, she's been a leader in the fight for abortion on demand and without apology. Sunsara Taylor most recently is one of the co-initiators of RefuseFascism.org, the national movement to drive out this fascist Trump and Pence regime. So please give a warm welcome to Sunsara Taylor.
I'm all for public flogging. One type of criminal that a public humiliation might work particularly well for are the juvenile delinquents, a lot of whom consider it a badge of honor to be sent to juvenile detention. And it might not be such a cool thing in the hood to be flogged publicly. You know what else? I'm getting a little fed up with hearing about, civilian casualties. I think we ought to nuke North Korea right now just to give the rest of the world a warning. We should invade their countries, kill their leaders, and convert them to Christianity. The government should be spying on all Arabs, engaging in torture as a televised spectator sport, dropping daisy cutters wantonly throughout the Middle East, and sending liberals to Guantanamo. Are you down with this? Because Coulter is. These are her words, and she means them.
Didn't you just say that?
Coulter is not a conservative. She's a Nazi. I'm all for public flogging. To flog someone means to beat them with a whip or a stick as punishment or torture. But Coulter didn't just say this in general. She specified and singled out a certain kind of criminal, the juvenile delinquents. But not just juvenile delinquents in general, those in the hood. Coulter's talking about black people. And specifically, she's singling out black children. And Coulter is saying black children should be whipped publicly, flogged publicly, humiliated publicly, just like slavery days. I'm getting a little fed up with hearing about, oh, civilian casualties. Coulter made this statement just a few months after the U.S. destroyed the city of Fallujah in Iraq for the first time. The U.S. cut off all entry and exit to the city, turned off the water, and ended the supply of basic necessities. Then it poured thousands of artillery rounds, hundreds of rockets, bombs, and missiles, and nearly 100,000 machine gun and cannon rounds into this densely populated city of 300,000 people. One Marine sergeant warned, "We'll unleash the dogs of hell. We'll unleash them. They don't even know what's coming. Hell is coming. If there are civilians in there, they're in the wrong place at the wrong time." The U.S. dropped white phosphorus on this city. White phosphorus is a chemical that burns the skin all the way down to the bone. You can't get it off your body. By international law, this is a war crime, a crime against humanity. The U.S. at first lied about it and tried to cover it up, but it was exposed. They dropped white phosphorus on Fallujah. As many as 2,000 Iraqis, labeled insurgents by the U.S., plus 800 or more that they admitted were civilians, were killed. The once crowded city lay empty and broken. 60% of its buildings damaged or destroyed. 36,000 homes, 9,000 shops, 65 mosques, 60 schools, both train stations, one of the 2 bridges, 2 power stations, 3 water treatment plants, and the city's entire sanitation and telephone systems. Oh, but I'm getting tired of hearing about civilian casualties. These are human beings Coulter is talking about. This is not rhetorical flourish. These are people, some of them students. They went to school, they sat in class, they fought with their parents, they fell in love or had their hearts broken, just like people in this room. But right now, fascists like Ann Coulter are zeroing in on Berkeley. They are targeting Berkeley, and people all over the country are debating this place, precisely because this is a place that is known more than anything else as a stronghold of resistance and radical and progressive politics and values. They are also targeting Berkeley because they're going after universities as a whole. You see, universities are more than any other arena of society, places where critical thinking has more of a space to flourish. And this is something that fascists hate and fear and want to shut down. And these fascists know that if they succeed in intimidating and making inroads here in Berkeley, it will have a chilling effect on the entire country. So this is what they are after. They serve and they are part of the Trump-Pence regime's move to consolidate fascism in America, with catastrophic consequences for people all over the world. So they've mobilized their intellectual hitmen like Ann Coulter, Milo Yiannopoulos, David Horowitz, and others to come to Berkeley. But it's not just that. They've also mobilized forces to come here who are obviously trained in violence and who intend to become the street militia of the Trump-Pence regime if and as the regime encounters further demonstrations and other forms of resistance. The forging of a fascist fighting squads and their targeting of Berkeley, amassing 2 times in this city in recent weeks by the hundreds, is an extremely ominous development. In a very real sense, there is a battle for Berkeley. It has become a flashpoint with huge stakes in the battle for the future of this country and its role and impact on the world. So I am here not only to oppose and expose what Ann Coulter and the Trump-Pence regime are about, but also to challenge those who should know better, who should be able to distinguish between dialogue and debate that furthers knowledge and understanding and a fascist crusade whose actual purpose is to undermine and even outlaw such debate. Also, in the true spirit of open contestation of differing views, I am here with a challenge to debate. No, I will not debate Coulter and other fascists and through doing so, lend them legitimacy. But I am more than happy to debate any conservative or liberal, including Robert Reich, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, or others who want to say that it is wrong to shut down and drive fascists off campus. Elizabeth Warren, the so-called firebrand of leftist politics, said, "If you can't ask Ann Coulter in a polite way questions which expose the weakness of her arguments, if all you can do is boo or shut her down or prevent her from coming, what does that tell the world? What are you afraid of? Her ideas?" This is wrong. The ideas Coulter and others like her have been spreading have been utterly discredited, and they cause real harm. And they serve to legitimate injustice, and they serve as battering rams in implanting fascism in this country. Was it harmless when Nazis fabricated their lies against Jews? Was it good that a section of people in Germany became whipped up around these lies, and that others started to treat them as part of the legitimate discourse? Was it harmless when an entire pseudoscience was developed to justify slavery and the so-called inferiority of black people? And when preachers went around the country quoting the Bible to justify this as well, was that harmless? No. It did real damage to the human beings subjected to generations of indescribable torment, exploitation, and brutality. Does it do harm when little girls are told their brains cannot comprehend science or math, or that the propensity to rape is inherent in males? Does it do harm that gay and trans people are called psychologically sick? These ideas are not harmless, and they have to be challenged in the strongest possible terms. That includes shouting people down and shutting people down when they are given platforms to spread this poison. People like Coulter are not just spreading ideas anyway. Coulter is a point person and a running dog for a whole fascist movement that's been building in this country for decades. In the late 90s, they impeached a president. In 2000, they stole an election. After 9/11, they opened Guantanamo Bay. They started watch lists. They created a culture of dragnet repression and spying. They took a battering ram to the separation of church and state. And through this all, over all these years, they've been building up their shock troops, religious Christian fanatics who bomb clinics and assassinate abortion doctors, Minutemen and other militia down at the border hunting immigrants, racist Tea Partiers with their grotesque white supremacist depictions of Barack Obama with a bone in his nose, drawn like an ape, saying we want to take our country back. They've been building this force for decades. But now, with the ascension to power of Donald Trump and Mike Pence, these fascists are not on the fringes. They're not even vying within the halls of power for greater influence. They are firmly established as the highest governing authority in this country right now. They control the White House. They control Congress. They control the state houses. They pack the military at all levels. They're loaded throughout the courts. And they are moving rapidly to strip democratic rights, to shut down the space for protest, to ethnically cleanse this country and make it white again, and to lock in place an outright fascist, openly terroristic form of rule. If this is not stopped, if this is not massively resisted by students, by people throughout society who rise up and drive this regime from power, this will be an utter catastrophe for humanity. In the words of Refuse Fascism's call to action, we say, because Trump has his finger on the nuclear trigger, the Trump-Pence regime is more dangerous to the world even than Hitler. I spoke about the US war crimes in Fallujah. Well, the man who was in charge of those atrocities, the man who commanded that invasion and assault and decimation of that city, his name is James Mad Dog Mattis. Donald Trump liked what he saw there so much, he made Mattis the Secretary of Defense, the highest commanding official of the armed forces of all branches, subject to no authority except for the one person that is the president. This is who's running things now. And meanwhile, Donald Trump plays nuclear chicken with North Korea, threatening millions of lives. Torturing and even murdering black children is not unique to Coulter either. In 1989, Donald Trump took out full-page ads demanding that the Central Park Five be executed, put to death. The Central Park Five were 5 teenagers. They were children. They were arrested, wrongly, coerced and framed up, coerced into confessing to a brutal rape they had nothing to do with. And they were sent to prison. They spent years there. They lost their childhoods. They fought and persevered, and after many years, as many as 13 years in prison, they finally were exonerated and released from prison. Just a few months ago, Donald Trump was asked about the Central Park Five. You know what he said? He said they should still be in prison. This racist dog, Donald Trump, is now the President of the United States. Or look what's being done to immigrants. On April 11th, Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, went to the border. In his Southern slave master's drawl, he declared it a hellscape, a ground zero of death and violence, where Americans must take our stand against a tide of evil flooding up from Mexico. He said the government would now detain every adult stopped at the border and surge the supply of immigration judges to expedite deportations. He said, be forewarned. This is a new era. This is the Trump era. Everywhere, everywhere, immigrants are living in terror. But Ann Coulter takes personal pride and credit for all this. She has bragged explicitly that Trump's immigration policy came straight from her books. Or look what this regime means to women. One of the very first things Trump did when he got in office was to sign the global gag rule. Immediately, with the stroke of a pen, putting abortion out of reach of millions of women around the world and condemning tens of thousands of women to death. Mike Pence and the whole army of Christian fascists that are an essential part of this regime believe women should submit to their husbands as their husbands submit to the Lord. They oppose not only abortion, but also birth control. They oppose gay marriage, and they have supported conversion therapy. That is, attempting to torture and shame the gay out of children. And there is no contradiction between this kind of fundamentalist enslavement of women and the crude boasting about sexual assault of Donald Trump. What unites these views is the outright degradation, hatred for, and enslavement of women. Oh, and Ann Coulter insists repeatedly that this country would be better off if women didn't have the right to vote. Then there's this regime's war on science, on critical thinking. There's the fact that an evolution denier is now in charge of the public schools. There's the climate change denial, the acceleration of fossil fuel extraction, all of this and more which puts the future of our planet, of life on this planet, directly on the line. For all these reasons, and many, many more it would take a lot longer to go through, it is not only right, it is righteous for people to stand up against this. It is not only right, it is the responsibility of everyone who does not want to live in a fascist America to not only drive these fascists off campus, to not only drive them out of Berkeley, but once again to drive them out of power, not just for ourselves, but in the name of humanity. So with this as a framework, with this setting the stage of the moment, the historic juncture that we find ourselves in, that this conversation tonight is taking place in, I want to speak directly to this question of free speech. This is being debated all over the country, on airwaves and newspapers, websites. What happened here in Berkeley with Milo Yiannopoulos and Ann Coulter and David Horowitz, it's being debated and treated like a question of free speech. But this is a lie. The question is not free speech. The question is the imposition of a fascist America. But because this question of free speech has got so many good people confused and on the defensive, because it's got so many people mixed up about what's right and wrong. I have a friend who told me before I came out here, he said, in my heart, I feel it's right to shut down Ann Coulter. But I'm not sure if I can make the argument in my head. Well, I think you have to make the argument. And here I want to provide 5 arguments why it's right. The first reason, as I've been speaking to, is that Ann Coulter, David Horowitz, Milo Yiannopoulos, and the fascist Trump-Pence regime they shill for and at times directly serve, it is they who are the real enemies of free speech. Just think about it. It's these people who have spent years, decades suppressing the vote, rerouting districts, and passing laws to suppress the vote. It is they who, because of all this, were able to take the presidency even though they lost the popular vote by more than 3 million. It is these fascists who, just like Hitler did, call the press the enemy of the people. Right now, Donald Trump is talking about changing libel laws so he can sue the press for stories he doesn't like. Reince Priebus the other day was interviewed on ABC News and openly admitted that right now they're looking at changing the First Amendment. It's the fascist President Trump who says he wants to imprison people for constitutionally protected speech, like flag burning, as well as strip flag burners of their citizenship. This was a Supreme Court case defending the right to burn the flag as a concentration of the right of free speech. And Donald Trump says, no, you should go to prison, and no, more than that, you should lose your citizenship. This is his view of free speech, and he has the authority and the power in the state to back him up. It is the fascist Trump who led the crowds to chant, "Lock her up," threatening his opponent with imprisonment, and 2 times, not once, 2 times, suggesting her assassination. It is Trump who stood on stage as people protested him in his crowds and said, I quote, "I'd like to punch that protester in the face." It is Trump who stood up when people are exercising their free speech and said, "I long for the days when protesters were dragged out on stretchers." It is Donald Trump who offered to pay the legal fees of anybody who assaulted one of the protesters who had the courage to stand up in his lynch mob crowds and cry out against what he's threatening to do to humanity. These people are the enemies of free speech. It is them. That's reason 1. It's a canard. They use this to get their foot onto campus, to then use their platform to intimidate and bludgeon and advance their fascist agenda. Point 2 is that one of the defining things about fascists is that the more they terrorize and bully and even murder others, the more they cry and whine about being the victims. Oh, poor Ann Coulter didn't get to speak at Berkeley. Oh, poor Milo. These people who have enormous book deals and platforms and media outlets that promote them all the time. But look at Donald Trump. They love this self-victimization. It's a cornerstone. It's a hallmark of every fascist movement. Donald Trump, born of privilege, spent his entire life whipping up lynch mobs against black people, ripping people off through his fraudulent Trump University, crudely demeaning and sexually assaulting women, lying and lying and lying, and then threatening anybody who challenges and exposes his lies. But oh, he's always ganged up on. The fake news won't give him a break. The establishment is against him. He's such an underdog. This false sense of victimhood is used to justify and lend a feeling of righteousness to these fascists as they persecute and crush those who oppose them. And let it be noted, Hitler did the same thing. He portrayed himself and the Volk, the Aryan people that he was claiming to speak for, as the victims of the Jewish elite.
Isn't that what you're doing right now?
Point three. Point three is that free speech argument that they make is wrong, because it's a distortion of the First Amendment. Stick with me, I'm making an argument here. The third reason is that they don't even understand the First Amendment. The First Amendment doesn't say that absolutely everyone is always guaranteed to say anything they want in any circumstance. It says, and I quote, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances." So now let's walk this through. The protesters and the students, they're not passing any laws to prohibit these fascists from speaking. They're not imprisoning Coulter or others for her ideas. These students and protesters don't have any state power to do that. No. Rather, what some of them have done, and what many, many, many more people need to do, is to stand up and exercise their own right to speak, to say this fascism is completely unacceptable and must not be tolerated. And it is their right, the right of these students and these protesters, to speak, to assemble, to make their views heard, that is being threatened, that is being demonized, that is being punished, including through wrongful arrest and imprisonment, that is being shut down both by the state and by the growing fascist movements. Point 4 has to do with the very important principle that we need to hear ideas, including ideas we deeply object to, by their most ardent advocates. That people need to be able to compare and contrast and to learn from this exchange. This principle, most famously put forward by John Stuart Mill, is indeed a very important principle, but it cannot be treated or applied as an absolute that is paramount in all situations and circumstances. Most especially, this principle is critically important for the dissemination and critical evaluation of poorly known and or unpopular ideas. This is true in general, but it is especially true if these are ideas which the dominant forces and relations of society, including the ruling structures of the state, if these are ideas that those ruling structures and dominant forces do not favor, if these are ideas that the ruling authorities are trying to actively discredit, contain, or suppress. Many examples of these distinctions could be given. Do climate change deniers, Holocaust deniers, Nazis, KKKers, anti-abortionists, white supremacists, creationists, and so on, do they really need to be provided additional platforms and extended respectful invitations to spread their views? No. These ideas are pumped out at us all of the time. In this society, under the current system, proponents of reactionary views and programs are given disproportionate means to spread their ideas. They're given all sorts of official backing, media platform, and funds and resources to spread their ideas. However, it is the proponents of countervailing and oppositional ideas, including ideas outside the mainstream, that run counter to those in power, and especially ideas of advocates for fundamental societal change. These ideas are often suppressed and have to wage an uphill battle to be heard. In other words, it is not a level playing field. So there is no need to provide reactionaries, and especially outright fascists, with additional platforms to spread their poison, though there is certainly a need to encourage and facilitate the broad dissemination of views that oppose this fascism. Point 5 is that it is quite wrong to think that the free contestation of opposing ideas and the ability for people to engage in critical thinking and compare and contrast can only take place through orderly and respectful engagement, or as Elizabeth Warren put it, by asking polite questions to a fascist like Coulter. It's wrong to think that's the only way it can happen, especially when one side of the debate has official backing and ties to the state, as Ann Coulter does, and the other side of the conversation are people who are suppressed, marginalized, silenced all the time, coming in, shutting them down, driving them off campus. Frankly, that can spark a much bigger and more vigorous debate. Don't you think that a lot of people who weren't even there when something like that happens decide to inform themselves, look into the issue so they can evaluate and discuss with others what was right, what was wrong, and make sense of this? A good protest aimed at those with entrenched power on behalf of those who do not have that kind of power and do not have that kind of platform can do a great service to opening up, compare, contrast, and intellectual discourse and ferment. So, for all these 5 reasons, as well as what I laid out at the beginning about the moment that we're in, it is not only right, it is righteous, it is necessary to shut down these fascists, to drive them off campus, to drive them out of Berkeley, and to drive them out of power. But before moving off this question of free speech, I want to speak to something that is often directed at people like me, sometimes me in particular, people who do advocate for fundamental societal change, and especially people like myself who advocate for communist revolution. And let me be clear, Refuse Fascism is an organization for everybody who wants to fight against this fascist regime. Myself, I am a communist revolutionary, and I'm part of this movement. But people say to me and people like me, but won't you do the same thing? Won't you suppress views that challenge you when you come to power? The answer is no. And here I urge everyone to get a copy of and read the Constitution for the New Socialist Republic of North America, which was authored by Bob Avakian, the chairman of the Revolutionary Communist Party and the architect of a new synthesis of communism. He's also was part of the free speech movement here at Cal. Read this Constitution because it provides a radical, a visionary, and a practical alternative to the world of horrors that we currently live under. It provides a roadmap to a society on the road to uprooting and abolishing all forms of exploitation and oppression. But also read it because of how it handles this question of promoting the widest possible intellectual ferment, dissent, debate, and engagement. Precisely because it is necessary to do this in order to discover what is really true and to enable people to rise up and change the world in a liberating and emancipating way. This Constitution protects speech in general, but including speech that challenges the revolutionary state, including ideas that advocate ending the revolutionary state and replacing it with something different, as well as protecting other ideas that go against convention and popular norms. This Constitution even guarantees that such ideas will be given resources and funding. This is because people do need to hear ideas put forward by their most ardent advocates, and because even with the changed and liberating character of the new state after a revolution, until the divisions in society that give rise to the need for a state have been fully uprooted, people must be protected and given recourse for any potential abuse from that state, even a revolutionary state. So as I said, I encourage you to read that, and I'd be happy to talk more about that in the Q&A. But for the final portion of what I want to discuss with you in presentation, I want to return to the immediate and very sharply posed battle for Berkeley. These fascists have drawn the battle lines here. Every day they are slamming Berkeley on Fox News and websites all over the country. Every day they're debating it. Milo Yiannopoulos is whipping up the drumbeat for his return for an entire week next semester on campus. Hundreds of militia types, alt-right fascists, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and NRA creatures assembled in MLK Park in downtown Berkeley last week.
They were wearing black masks, weren't they?
Hundreds of cops on Berkeley campus, all of a sudden threatening people with arrest if they have a sign that is larger than some arbitrary dimensions, and actually arresting someone for allegedly covering their face. Vile threats coming into the administrative offices here at Berkeley for canceling her tour. We heard about this while booking this room. The people answering the phone are getting vile threats from fascists around the country. Students on this campus told us they were physically scared. This is a harbinger of the future if the Trump-Pence regime is not driven out. So the battle for Berkeley has real stakes, and it must be won by the right side. These fascists and too many liberals like to say, oh, the great irony that Berkeley, the birthplace of the free speech movement, is now shutting down speech. This is a distortion. And I think it's important to take a little time on this, not only to set the record straight, but also because there are critically important lessons for students today, as well as for others. So let's set the record straight. The free speech movement was not about fighting for the ability of racists connected to the state to come and spew their poison. It was not even about fighting for speech rights in the abstract. The free speech movement was fighting for the rights of students to organize against racism. Students had been down at Mississippi Freedom Summer in 1964, and they came back to this campus and tried to set up a table and talk to other students about this, and the administration started enforcing their rules that you can't do anything pertaining to off-campus issues on campus. Bob Avakian, as I mentioned, was a student here at that time, and he was active in the free speech movement from the very beginning. He was one of the 800 students arrested at the sit-in at Sproul, which was decisive in the ultimate victory of the free speech movement. But before that, on October 1st, 1964, Jack Weinberg was arrested for refusing to fold up his table for civil rights on campus. Thousands of students came out and surrounded the police car with Jack in it for 32 hours. At that same time, Bob Avakian was at a reception given by Chancellor Strong, who was the chancellor at the time, for undergraduate honors students. During this reception, the chancellor was asked about what was happening, and in response, he openly admitted that he had been asked by the management at the Oakland Tribune to do something to stop campus organizing that was aimed at the Tribune's discriminatory practices. So Chancellor Strong explained that he looked into it, and he discovered that an area where the political tables and organizing was centered was not city property, as they had previously thought, but was actually university property. And therefore, the administration had moved to put a stop to the organizing that was going on there. Bob Avakian wrote about this. He said, "I couldn't believe it. I was shocked, not just by the content of what Strong was saying, but by the fact that he didn't even try to disguise it or dress it up. He didn't see anything wrong or even controversial about what he was telling us, and it was clear he didn't expect that we would either. Apparently, he thought that being model students, we would also be model citizens, narrow-minded, self-centered, grade grubbers in training to become money grubbers and loyal upholders of the status quo." Avakian continued. He said, "I immediately left the chancellor's reception, walked over to the sit-in around the police car, got in line to speak, and when my turn came, climbed on the car and told the others there what the chancellor's explanation had been, and that as a result, I was joining the protest and donating my $100 honor student honorarium to the cause. Although I didn't know it yet, this was a turning point in my life, as it was for many others. The free speech movement and its larger context. It was not merely about the rights of students in the abstract or in themselves, but about the right and, yes, the responsibility to support and take part in the struggle against the glaring injustices in American society as a whole, especially the oppression of black people. Had this not been the case, the free speech movement would not have had the great attractive force that it did. So these are some of Avakian's reflections. And it's the actual history of the free speech movement. This legacy is not being betrayed when students stand up and drive fascists off campus. It is being betrayed when students go about their business, look the other way, or keep their noses in their books when great crimes are being advanced and locked into place. But this legacy, and much more that has happened here, on this campus and in this city, and in the Bay Area in general, is precisely why the fascists have targeted this place. It is precisely what they want to extinguish, and through that, further shut down and permanently erase any basis for people anywhere to stand up against them. This is a battle, the battle for Berkeley, with very high stakes as to whether a full-out fascist regime will be consolidated in this country, and we are much closer to that than most people are allowing themselves to think. Waging this battle is not a distraction, and ignoring this battle will not make it go away. The question is, will they succeed? When the fascists and the cameras are focused here on Berkeley, will the world see silence and complicity? Or will they see the inspiring and righteous example of students standing up and saying no, waging the kind of massive, disruptive, uncompromising, and courageous mass resistance that is necessary to dislodge a fascist regime? This would not be a good thing. This would be a great thing. Let people see students and others, old radicals coming out of retirement alongside young people stepping out for the first time, refusing, as Bob Avakian put it, to be narrow-minded, self-centered grade grubbers in training to become money grubbers and loyal upholders of the status quo, stepping out instead and putting it on the line to shut down and drive out these fascists. This is the example people need from Berkeley. Berkeley needs to become Berkeley again. And what each of you do, every person in this room and the people you know, has real consequences right now. Let us rise to this challenge, not just for ourselves, but in the name of humanity. Thank you.
Okay, so in the back right here.
You said this is a battle for Berkeley, and you mentioned a lot of students coming up and rising up. Are you aware it's actually conservative students who asked for Milo and Coulter? It's actually students at Berkeley who asked for Milo and Coulter.
Okay, the question for the live stream, if they couldn't hear, was, are we aware that it's actually the students, conservative students on this campus that asked for Milo and Ann Coulter?
Yeah. So?
So my point is, you seem to drive them out. Do you expect all the conservative students just to leave Berkeley?
So she said, do I expect all the students who are conservative to leave Berkeley? No, I actually think that the students should be exposed to Berkeley who are conservative, and maybe you can expand what you understand about the world. But I'll tell you this, I really don't care who invited Milo. I know there are fascist students. Just because they're students, that doesn't mean they have the right to shut down discourse and debate for others and help facilitate a fascist America. I really don't care who you are. There was Nazi youth. It didn't make them any more acceptable that they were young.
Right. So I personally asked for Milo or Coulter. But my point, really is.
So let me just respond. She said she personally asked for, we're going to go to another question in a moment, but let me just ask you a question. You personally asked for Ann Coulter and Milo. So do you think that black children should be flogged?
I said I personally didn't ask.
Oh, you personally didn't. Okay, let me hear you.
I just personally think it's like, I don't agree with I am conservative. I have personal ideas too. The thing is, I'm also aware that some people, you know, conservative or liberal, are going to say things I don't like. And like, for example, I've heard you say, I'm sure you don't believe all Christians, but I've heard you say Christians don't believe in birth control or are homophobes, which is kind of ironic since I am bisexual. But the thing is, like, it comes down to the fact I think everybody should have a voice, no matter what, even if I hate what they're saying. You have to listen and absolutely agree with what people are saying. That's the point of free speech. It's not just what say what you want to say, but hearing sometimes what you don't want to hear and just having some understanding. And if you don't like it, walk away.
Yeah, if you don't like it, walk away, she's saying. But you know what? When they're in power, you're acting like students are depriving these fascists of speaking. Last time I checked, Donald Trump signed another executive order today, encroaching further upon women's access to abortion and birth control, expanding the scope of religious bigotry and actually undermining the First Amendment. You can't walk away from that. That's this power of the state. No right is absolute. And the truth is that fascists are in power. We're going to get another question, but she mentioned, and I'm repeating it for the live stream, and in case anybody couldn't hear her, she mentioned that she didn't like the fact that I referred to Christians, she's a Christian, and described some of them as bigoted and homophobic. But I didn't say all Christians, and I think we should be accurate. I didn't say all Christians. I said Christian fascists. I said Christian fascists who are part of the regime. I named Mike Pence and the Christian fascists who are part of his regime. And he has a track record. And you can fact check me.
Without getting put down after they have to say what they want to say.
You don't want me to put somebody, I'm speaking facts. If you find that problematic, then you need to look into Mike Pence. You need to look into what Trump is doing. I'm talking about facts. And the fact is there are Christian fascists in power in this country. And they are terrorizing and stripping the rights of women, and they passed further laws on this today. So we'll take another question.
Okay, right here with the one finger in the air. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to ask specifically about your point 4. I was referring to John Stuart Mill. How would you suggest, if you suggested this principle somehow limited and wasn't applicable in general, how would you suggest we evaluate what it is applicable to and what it's not applicable to, and how doesn't that just automatically become you just being an arbiter now of what is good or bad or whatever?
Okay, that's a really good question. I'll repeat it. You want to repeat it?
He was asking about Sunsara's point 4 about John Stuart Mill and her suggestion that it wasn't an absolute principle, and maybe it's limited, and how do you tell what the limits of that are, and how does that not become just arbitrary authority or something, or those decisions?
Yeah, the clarification I added to that point 4, the reason it's not absolute. You know, I saw Ann Coulter the other day. She was on one of these, I don't know which, she was all over the circuit of the media talking about being canceled here, and she was talking to Robert Reich, and they both were agreeing that in the First Amendment, there's no asterisks. She was saying there's no asterisks. It doesn't say you have free speech to say this, that, and the other, but not X, Y, and Z. And that was her point. But actually, if you look at the First Amendment, you look at the Constitution, when it was written, she said, maybe you're smarter than our founders, but there was no asterisk. If you look at the Constitution, and when it was written, there was an invisible asterisk, because the right to speak was completely denied to African and black people who were enslaved. It was completely denied to Native people who had no rights. So I'm using this as a segue to respond to your question. The distinction to the John Stuart Mill point I was quoting, that people should hear ideas put forward by their most ardent advocates, is that those who have to go up against entrenched authority and the power of the state need special protection and platform to do so. Those who are putting forward the ideas which are entrenched in the state, which are being given the backing of the military, of the police forces, of the courts, those who are being given the backing of institutions like universities and the media, they do not need extra protection. That's the distinction. And that's why I said, you know, after a revolution, speaking for myself as a communist and as a supporter of the Revolutionary Communist Party and the Constitution for the new Socialist Republic, it makes special protections. It's written into the Constitution that if you want to criticize the government and even advocate getting rid of our government and replacing it with a different system, you will have the protection to do so.
We already have that. That's called the First Amendment. That's what it is.
But it's not actually true. No, I'm sorry. That's actually very, very not true.
Okay, you have not read history then. Seriously.
Okay, so you're going to dispute that when the Constitution was written, black people had no access to those rights. You're going to dispute that right now.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying right now. That is what the First Amendment gives us.
No, it doesn't actually. People are being arrested for protesting across this country. They're passing laws in North Dakota that you can be killed with a car. You could be, no, I'm quoting laws that they're passing right now, that you could be run over and killed with a car if you're part of a protest, as long as the person who hits you and kills you claims it was an accident.
You could also be arrested for laughing at Jeff.
Okay,
that's a good point. Yes. She makes a good point. They just convicted a woman who was, this brother right here was also there that day, the day that Jeff Sessions was doing his confirmation hearing, and he and others got up and disrupted. He got arrested for speaking there, but this other woman didn't even get up to speak. There was somebody saying, Jeff Sessions is such a good guy. He's not a racist. He's a really nice guy. And she started laughing. She couldn't contain herself. She is now convicted, okay? That First Amendment that you say...
Oh, what? He is a racist. I think most people agree with that.
But she has been convicted in court today. It came out.
Actually, that's not exactly correct. The reason she was convicted by the jury, it wasn't because she laughed, but was because, like, say what she said after, like, according to the jury, like, say what she said after war, enough to disrupt the jury, which was...
No, what happened is she laughed, and then the security came and grabbed her. And then whatever she said after that was out of bewilderment by the fact that she was being dragged out for that. And my point in giving this example, and we could give many examples, where people who exercise what is supposed to be, you're right, it's supposed to be protected constitutionally, but every day this is violated when you are going up against entrenched authority. And that's a good example that she offered, and there are many others. It's just a fact.
Okay, and I just want to remind people, if you're not authorized to film or take pictures, if you could please stop filming, thank you. All right, and I also want to remind people that if you want to ask a question but don't want to raise your hand and do it that way, there are comment cards you can fill out. Okay.
And pass to the end.
And pass to the end.
There you go.
Okay, with the visor, who had your hand up?
You sounded awful like a prosecutor in a trial, laying out a lot of facts that are unsubstantiated, accusing people of things without any proof, and not allowing them to respond, specifically not allowing them to respond in their own defense. As a constitutionalist and somebody who wants to make a government work, I don't believe in the type of judicial system that only allows a prosecutor to make those type of accusations and to define the words that only you can use. How is your new justice system going to work to allow somebody like me to challenge you being the authority figure?
Okay, well, do you want to repeat that for people?
He said that Sunsara Taylor sounds like a prosecutor.
Okay, I'll repeat it. Bear with me. Hold on. I want to get your whole question. Hold on.
Who was able to define all the words and all the terms and only the way...
Okay, but you got to wait because I want to speak for the...
I'm trying to define my question so you can respond. Otherwise you...
No, because we have a live stream and I want them to hear what you said. You can add to it, but let me repeat it so we're all on the same page. He said, I sound like a prosecutor and I'm making all these accusations and citing all these facts without any substantiation. And that he is upset because, if I'm understanding you correctly, that I am claiming for myself the right to define the words and decide who fits them and who doesn't. Is that?
Well, I'm asking you to define your judicial system where only you make the rules.
He wants me to, okay, that's a good question. He wants me to define my judicial system where only I get to make the rules. I can't do that for you because that's not the judicial system I'm advocating for. That's a gross distortion. There's a constitution. It has laws and rights. This is after a revolution. Bear with me. After a revolution, this is the constitution I would like to see imposed on society. It's a framework that guarantees people's right to eat. It guarantees their ability to work together to overcome. I'm answering you. You have to give me a moment. No. And
She's speaking.
She's answering your question.
But she's not talking about judicial system. She's talking about...
I'm getting there. You know what? I'm getting there. All right, so anyway, in this book, it's a framework as opposed to this constitution, which is based on exploitation and plunder here and all over the world. It's a constitution, the U.S. Constitution of a capitalist society. This is a constitution for a socialist society that is meeting the needs of the people, that is caring for the environment, that is not governed by profit, and that is serving the world revolution. In this constitution, it says explicitly, everybody is subject to the same rule of law. I'm not going to read you a 8-page constitution right now. There's a lot of laws and regulations in it, and they apply to everybody. They're not arbitrary. I don't make them up. Secondly, you made an unsubstantiated accusation. You said I cited a lot of stuff without evidence. I defy you to tell me anything I said that was not factually true, the facts that I quoted in my speech.
How? In what form?
You said I made it up. I didn't make anything up.
I respond, but in what forum? I'm not able to record it. Can I have the source document, and can we respond in a public forum?
The speech
You raised
is
your
online.
hand and you got to speak, okay?
Yeah.
So if you disagree with something that she said, you can raise it. Otherwise, we're going to go on to the next
Yeah,
question.
we're going to go on. I can't
Okay.
argue if you don't make... Look,
I'm trying to agree.
Okay, right here in the front. Go ahead.
On a slightly different note, I have a stand up so they can hear you. Sure. On a slightly different note, a three-part question. How can the left, assuming this is its goal, win back the working class? Is it effective, much less accurate, to describe every single Trump supporter, even the really skeptical ones, as all racist? How do you distinguish yourselves from Democratic opposition to Trump? Thanks.
okay, 3-part question. You want to repeat that?
Okay, I'm not sure if I can remember it, but how can, 3-part question, how can the left win back the working class? What was the second one?
Is it effective, much less accurate, to describe all Trump supporters as racist?
Is it effective, much less accurate, to describe all Trump supporters as racist?
How do you distinguish yourselves from Democratic opposition to Trump?
How do you distinguish yourself from, you mean Democratic Party opposition to Trump? Okay.
Okay, so questions. Thank you. How can the left win back the working class? I'll tell you, I am not fighting to win back the working class. I'm fighting to make a revolution. And I think there's an important distinction. The revolution should include those who are among the working class, both in this country and around the world. But this is actually a big part of the new synthesis of communism that Bob Avakian has developed, is that the communist revolution and what makes the workers and the proletariat an important class in history is not just for the workers themselves, but because it is their historic mission, not mission, but their historic position and ability through their revolution to emancipate humanity. So in the revolution, especially in a country like this, a revolution will be made up of a lot of people who are part of the working class, but a lot of people who aren't, who are cast out of work, a lot of black youth and others in the inner cities, a lot of people who are locked down in prison, a lot of women from many strata who hate their conditions of oppression and can be won to rebel against that, a lot of people who are from different strata, from the arts and from other strata, students and youth. I am interested in making a revolution that overturns the system of capitalism, that has terrorized the world and that has brought forward a Donald Trump and a fascist regime. And I am for bringing forward everybody who needs to be part of that, from among the working class, but also from other sections of society, to overthrow this system, not to build a powerful left within this system. So that's point 1. Point 2, we'll get you guys, I'll go quickly through these others. When I was speaking, I was talking about the Trump-Pence regime and their fascist operatives. They are white supremacists to the bone.
Right.
Top to bottom, forward, backwards, that's who they are, okay? Now, that does not mean absolutely everybody who voted for him did so because they are stone cold to the bone racists. There's a distinction between those who voted for him and the operatives themselves, but I'll tell you this. I'm not for letting them off the hook on this one, because there is no avoiding that you voted for somebody who bragged and boasted about calling Mexicans rapists and demonizing Mexicans, demonizing Latinos, demonizing Muslims, demonizing black people. This is who they knew they were voting for. And I'm sorry, they're not all beyond hope. We can win some of them over, we need to aim to do so, but you don't do that by soft pedaling and trying to appeal to their, quote, legitimate concerns.
Right.
That's bullshit. Not to mention the misogyny, which was a big part of his selling point too. Let's just be real. There's a lot of revenge that a lot of men in this country feel, including among these white people who voted for him, because of the changes this world has gone through and this country has gone through with globalization and women entering the workforce. There's changes in the economy that have caused that, and there's changes in the struggle of women that have caused that. And so there's been a breakdown of the traditional patriarchal family. a lot of women going to work, a lot of men who can't find work, and a lot of revenge and resentment that has been fostered. And so a lot of these men, there's a reason, it was no accident, one of the most popular shirts at the Trump rallies was "Trump that bitch." It's not an accident, this misogyny. People say, oh, how did he get over, even though the tapes came out about him bragging about sexual assault. I'm sorry, that was a selling point for a lot of these people. So I think we have to reckon with this. I don't write them all off, but you have to struggle with what they support, what they've signed up for, and actually that's a lot of what the appeal was, and you have to struggle with people and break them out of that if there's any chance for them. So your third question, how do I distinguish myself from Democratic Party opposition? Well, let's see, I've never called black people super predators. I don't think we should have mass incarceration. I was against the militarization of the border when Clinton did it. I was against the drones when Obama did them. I don't think we should have the right to assassinate human beings, including US citizens. Every Tuesday morning, Obama would go over the kill list. I distinguish myself from the Democrats because I am not an upholder and defender of American imperialism.
Yeah.
Furthermore, last thing quickly on this is I defy you to find a Democrat who will call Donald Trump a racist and a fascist. They all get out there, they say, oh, he's incompetent. They all came out and said it's 100 days of failures. No, it was 100 days of fascism. And they won't say that because they don't, because if you admit that half your system, half the legitimate operatives and mouthpieces of your system, including the half that's in power, is stone cold, raving, fascist, racist, white supremacist, misogynist, trigger happy for nuclear weapons, and illegitimate, then what does that make you if you represent that same system? So, my point.
And she's a Democrat.
Who did? I'm sorry.
Barbara Lee.
Barbara Lee, racist. You're right. There's a few people who will say this, but I'm talking about the whole program and what it means to humanity. And look, that's part of the way the Democrats work too. They always have that one person a little bit to the left who keeps you satisfied, keeps you coming back. Oh, we got the Kucinich. Oh, we got the Barbara Lee. You have one of them all the time. Meanwhile, the party approves Jeff Sessions. Meanwhile, the party approves Betsy DeVos. Meanwhile, the party rolls along and legitimates fascism and tells you that your big beef should be that you might lose your health care. Now, that is a crime. It is a crime, but it's not the only thing. And that's all they want you to think about. They say, never mind the people of the world. So this is another distinction. So I see a bunch of hands. I'll stop.
Okay, so I really...
This guy with the neck thing...
Yeah, I was going to say first,
yeah,
I really like your no Trump, no KKK, no Fascist USA t-shirt, but for the second time, could you stop filming if you haven't been authorized to film? Thank you. Because this whole event is going to be on YouTube. It's live streamed. You can watch it at refusefascism.org. So please respect the integrity of the event. Thank you.
Conservative media that was actually allowed to film or take pictures here?
You know what? It's all online. Go ahead, man.
Thank you. So I would classify myself more on the conservative side overall. I don't totally agree with all of conservatism. I would actually agree with you guys a lot on like economics. I'm definitely more on the fiscal liberal side of things. I do believe in single-payer healthcare. I do believe that the state should have a vested interest to provide for those who really cannot provide for themselves. But my question is, from like a cultural, social standpoint, in this society you envision and like what you're advocating for, what is the sort of social, cultural, moral bedrock that could enable a fiscally liberal society to exist? Because it is my belief, and you're probably the expert, you may correct me, but I believe that in order for fiscal liberalism to be sustainable, you would need a society that has socially conservative values. For instance, in Asia, where there is single-payer healthcare, but also people tend to take care of their bodies more. They also take care of their elders, so there's not as much of a strain on the collective system that then can step in and take care of the rest. So how would you promote, what set of values would you espouse? You get my question? Like, what set of values, how would you advocate for it?
Okay, I feel like this is going to be a big challenge for you to repeat that.
Fiscally liberal, socially conservative, what set of values is
Yeah, what sort of social values, since I believe social conservatism should precede fiscal liberalism.
Okay, so he's saying that social conservatism should precede fiscal liberalism. Did I get that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay, now here's the challenge that I'm going to put back to you is that I'm not a liberal. So I'm not going to answer the question you're asking. I'm not going to promote liberal values or liberal economics.
No,
I'm going to,
like,
no,
like communism.
but I will talk about that. I will say this. Right now, I want to promote two things and two overlapping sets of values and political programs. One is, where I'm coming from fundamentally, is that we need to overthrow the system of capitalism.
Yeah.
We need to overthrow the state that enforces it, the militaries that back it up, the police forces, the courts, all of this. We need to clear it away, and we need to build a new revolutionary state power that is moving society towards the slogan from Marx, from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. Putting the needs of the people first in the economy. There's a lot of this is laid out in the Constitution, and I encourage people, it's very important to read and open your mind up to, and actually for us to fight and implement. It would make a big difference for humanity. As part of that, the values that correspond to that, and they're also written into this, they are very straightforward. They say internationalism. The whole world comes first. American lives are not more important than other people's lives. They're about overcoming the legacy and the scars of white supremacy and male domination and discrimination. They're about valuing our diversity. It's a multilingual state, and it promotes diversity of culture in the education system, in the living system, in the media and other forms. There's a morality that is based on the collective good and the flourishing of individuality within that context. There's a morality that corresponds to the emancipation of humanity. And there are principles that the Revolution Club has put forward, the forces who are part of organizing for this revolution today, that have put forward that it lives by, including valuing the truth and critical thought and evidence-based exploration of the world. There's a whole, and going with that even when it's unpopular. So there's a whole set of values that I'm fighting for and a revolution I'm fighting for. At the same time, I am uniting with everybody right now who wants to say that we want to stand up against a fascist America. And you don't have to be for a communist revolution to do that. You might want what you're asking about, and somebody else in Refuse Fascism could help answer that question. What they see as a fiscal liberal society and a social conservative society, and how they see constructing that. And you could probably advocate for that. But if any of us are going to have anything but an absolute nightmare for humanity and a lockdown society, we have to come together now, and with the values of standing up and saying no to fascism, and saying no to white supremacy, saying no to fascists on campus, and saying that and going into the streets in a sustained way in our millions, and organizing to drive them out of power. So there was a guy over here with his...
Which one? Right here?
With the vest. Yep.
Yeah.
Do you feel that going against free speech is a counterintelligence tactic when we constantly find the truth and we become conscious, and those that write the laws and write the amendments, when they get exposed and the truth comes out, they contradict themselves?
Right.
So it's counterintelligence tactic so that they can avoid debating about the truth or being confronted about the lies that they told.
That's a great question. So he asked, correct me if I'm mischaracterizing you, but I think what I understood you to be asking is the suppression and the attacks on speech that are going on from the government part of suppressing people's ability to find out what the dirty shit that they're doing is, exposing it and standing up against it and raising our voices to stop it? Is that it?
Yep, pretty much.
I would say yes.
Okay, right here with the glasses.
So, I'm the president of Berkeley College Republicans. I personally invited Milo. We've both been on Fox News. I'm glad that we can finally meet. What I want to ask you is, will you condemn unequivocally the violence that's been perpetrated against my organization for the past 6 months? Will you stand up for our right to free speech? Will you join us to ensure that everyone here can feel safe and can express their opinion without having to fear violence perpetrated against them? Will you do that? Or will you continue to accept the criminal activity your Soros-funded organization continues to push in Berkeley?
Never again!
Okay,
Never
so
again!
Listen. I want to ask you, are you going to condemn the 59 Tomahawk missiles on Syria, the mother of all bombs on Afghanistan, the nuclear chicken with North Korea and the world? Because I'm sorry, you want to talk about violence? I don't want to hear this. You want to talk? No, I am answering. Jeff Sessions. Hold up.
Can you let her respond, please?
All right, obviously. I'm sorry. I am not going to give you the satisfaction of what you're asking for. I find it absurd. Unless you're going to come out and denounce actual violence carried out by the state, I feel no responsibility to denounce something that's not being done by a state against an oppressed people in the name of terrorizing humanity. This is the question of the time. Let's hear you do it. You want to condemn the violence of the mother of all bombs? You want to condemn the violence of the police who killed?
Why would you condemn violence against your fellow Americans? I am just as much an American as you are. Why would you condemn the violence that's been perpetrated against my group?
I honestly don't know about violence against your group, and I'm telling you again, hold on.
People, excuse me, people came to hear Sunsara respond to these questions, okay?
Incredibly important.
Whoa.
This is incredibly important. There's clear video evidence when Milo was here of multiple people who were not in any way armed with helmets, didn't have sticks, being attacked by black masked mobs using their Antifa flags as weapons, being maced after they literally said positive things about counter-protesters, being beaten unconscious on the street. For you to say you have no idea just shows how completely out of touch with reality you are.
No, actually, that's not true. That's actually not true.
That's not true!
Wait a second. I said I don't know about violence against the individuals in his group. Okay? No, hold on. I don't know who's in here. Excuse me. I don't.
Coulter's every word, but you don't know it.
You have to let her
Okay,
speak.
people. All right, people, calm
Let her
down.
speak. Let her speak.
She doesn't let other people speak.
Sit down.
Yeah,
People came here.
drag me out of here. How about that?
People took time. People took time out of their day to be part of this event. So respect the integrity of the event.
Your followers are costing the Berkeley community hundreds of thousands of dollars a week.
Okay, you know what? You know what?
We don't like it. Where are you from anyway? You're not from our community, are you?
You know what? This is an absurd, that's an absurd thing. That's like the argument that they made to the civil rights workers. You're not from here, are you? That's the shit that they said. Look, I'm talking. You can scream if you want. You can scream if you want.
You're hurting our community with your violent...
No, actually, you're making an accusation you don't know anything about. And let me just explain something. Let me explain something. If you guys, okay, you know what? It's like somebody came in. It's like somebody came in and dropped a bomb and leveled the school. And And then you want to walk in. Hold on. You want to walk in and say, but you know what? Somebody tripped somebody over here. It's a false equivalency. I am talking about massive violence carried out by the state.
The lies coming out of your mouth, lady, are just amazing.
I'm glad that you think that you know what's inside my head. No, we're going to continue to ask. We're going to continue to take other questions.
Calling you a liar? Are people who support Donald Trump calling anybody a liar? Are you guys fucking kidding me? You guys Republicans have any goddamn nerve to call anybody out? You guys support white supremacy. You guys are fascists. You guys get a fire on the world.
For people who didn't hear that, she just very correctly and righteously said it is the height of hypocrisy for Republicans at this campus who brought Milo the fascist to town, who invited Coulter, who wants to flog black children. You have no right to speak about this. I'm sorry, it's not true. I'm not addressing you. And you know what? We're going to take another question. Here we go.
Okay. Over here in the chase shirt.
You're just going to ignore me.
You spoke, okay?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
This needs to be heard.
Please let the brother speak over here, man.
Go ahead, man.
You say your piece,
So all this doesn't really feel like we're rising above Trump. It kind of feels like we're beating ourselves down to his level.
Yeah.
You actually have to free speech. That's a great thing. I don't know about revolution really being an answer to all of this. It's violence, and it doesn't work against the government. It's too big of a government. And I get that Berkeley's feeling depressed and angry or whatnot. I don't know if you really represent a larger part or whatnot, but I would ask you what you think about silent protests. And you look at history, how Martin Luther King, Gandhi, and Berkeley have, right? All these people have done, they've understood that you can't fight the government, you can't fight it all the way. It doesn't work. Yeah, but there have been some ideas that people work, silent protests. Now my question.
Okay, so, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to repeat, and the essence of what I understand that you're saying is, one, you don't think revolution works against this government, and it would only incite more violence. And your question was, what about other forms of protest, specifically silent protest, along the lines of MLK, Mahatma Gandhi, and Cesar Chavez? Is that more or less what you said?
Those things have worked, and they've actually...
And those things have worked and changed things.
Why not attack from a legal standpoint? Like, they're talking about the laws and such. If you look at the amendments and everything, Republicans have gotten that being walked down.
Okay, so I'm going to pause you because I want to repeat it.
I'm not.
No, let me, before you go further and I forget what you're saying, he also said... All right, go ahead, man.
But, you know, they got that stuff locked down, and the legislation protects and Coulter and all of them. Why do we think about, and as a college, start like passing some legislation, putting something on the table so that there is more protection, or we do the right thing in this scenario. You know, but yeah, I think we should avoid reacting in violence, because that's just kind of what is just going to make things.
Okay, so revolution doesn't work, it causes more violence. Silent or peaceful protest along the lines of Mahatma Gandhi, MLK, and this sort of thing. And why don't we go the legal route? The Republicans have done it, they've got it on lockdown, they're passing laws, why don't we? And I'm going to try to answer these together. I actually think the last question you asked, the Republicans and fascists have got the laws on lockdown, why can't we do the same thing, actually reveals part of the answer. This is a state that is built on white supremacy and exploitation. It is not a neutral state. It is a state that defends exploitation, not only in this country but around the world. You notice you have the right to hire somebody, to fire them if you can't make a profit off of them. You have the legal right to put somebody out of work even if they're going to starve to death. You do not have the right to eat. You do not have the right to eat. What could be more basic to being a human being on this planet than the right to eat? But you can't have that right under capitalism, because food, like everything else, is a commodity. It doesn't get grown, it doesn't get shipped, it doesn't get picked, it doesn't get put on the shelves unless somebody at each point along the way receives an exchange for their labor put into it in the form of money. It's a commodity, it's for profit. So if you eat or don't eat is not a fundamental right, but being able to exploit somebody else, to hire their wages, to make profit off of them is a fundamental right under capitalism. This is one example of many about why this state, the state serves the economic base, it enforces that. And you can't pass laws in violation of that without ripping up the foundation underneath it. That's why you need a revolution. Just hold with me there. That's why you need a revolution. Now here's where your second thing is wrong. You say that a revolution can't work against the state. I will grant you that it is very, very, very difficult. And it is what a lot of the revolutionary movements in the 60s broke their backs on. They could not figure out how you go up against this massive military power of the state. This is one of the tremendous breakthroughs that Avakian has made in developing and advancing the strategy for revolution. And people should get into it. It's not any day of the week that you can create you can make a revolution, but there are conditions that can come together, certain kinds of crisis where there is enough arousal of the masses of people, where there's enough fighting among the rulers, where there's enough weaknesses among them, that you can actually, and if you have built up the organization, prepared the ground, prepared the people, and prepared the leadership, where you can have a go at leading millions to wage a revolution. That is possible. No empire lasts forever. That's a fact. So, hold up, I'm finishing. So, that is possible. I think it's worth working for. At the same time, people who are coming from different perspectives, we should work together. Silent protests, there's all kinds of tactics that can be part of the process. Sometimes that can be a good idea, sometimes other things are necessary. If you want to make it, what I disagree with is institutionalizing it as the only form and as the criteria. That I find ineffectual. And actually Mahatma Gandhi, MLK, the examples you gave, they didn't bring about fundamental change. Everything, I mean look, I just went and heard the 50th anniversary of MLK's speech on the Beyond Vietnam, where he said, at this very hour, the greatest purveyor of violence in the world is the government of America.
Yeah.
That is more true today than in MLK's time. The things he stood up and fought against have gotten worse. They've gotten worse. This is why I was going to mention Jeff Sessions once again. And I got cut off when I was talking about this, but Jeff Sessions, look, after the police killed Laquan McDonald, 17-year-old black youth in Chicago, shot him 16 times and covered it up all the way to the highest level of the city of Chicago. Tamir Rice, shot and killed, 12 years old, and that happened in Cleveland. After Ferguson and all over the country, Oscar Grant, black people being killed by police, and people rose up against this. There was what was called consent decrees put in by the federal government. Mainly they were to restore the legitimacy of the police forces, make a few cosmetic changes to try to reestablish the legitimacy of these police that were so exposed for having murdered and tortured and brutalized so many people. They banned things like pistol whipping. They banned things like tasing somebody who were in handcuffs. They banned things that were so, never should have happened. And Jeff Sessions just came out and said this would shackle the police, and he's lifting these decrees. They would shackle the police. So I don't want to hear a story about how MLK accomplished lasting change. He did many things, and people who fought with him were very righteous. But the changes they brought about have been undermined by this very system. It's why we need a revolution. So we'll get another question.
Okay, so right here with the fraternity sweatshirt. Go ahead. No, behind you.
So this has been asked in many iterations. I'm going to give a very simple
question.
Wait,
slow down.
This has been asked in many iterations. I'm going to give a very simple question. Do you justify violence against fascists? Yes or no? And if no, why don't you loudly condemn all your followers enacting violence against fascists?
Look, I want to say very frankly, not all violence is the same. Not all violence is the same. Let me give an example. Yes, you can film this. You can film this. The violence of a rapist. The violence of a rapist.
Excuse me, people should actually listen to what she has to say here. She's answering the question. A number of people have raised this question. You should listen to her response.
Many people want to hear the question heard again.
The violence of a rapist is degrading, demeaning, horrific, shattering of not just that woman, but it's a form of terror against all women. That is violence that should always be opposed. The violence of a woman fighting back against her rapist, even brutalizing him to get herself free, that is liberating violence. Let's just be clear here. There's not an equivalency. There's not an equivalency. The violence of the lynch mob, the violence of the lynch mob, the violence of the lynch mob of stringing black people up, of flogging black people like Ann Coulter wants to talk about. I am talking about it. I am talking about it.
What happened here?
Yeah, and I'm talking about this. Is not the same as the violence of people standing up to stop a lynch mob. Now, I have not advocated any violence tonight. Let me be clear. But I'm not coming out here to condemn people whose heart is in the right place, who are standing up against a fascist regime. You will not find me do that. I will condemn those who are dropping drones on civilians in wedding parties. I will condemn police who are terrorizing and brutalizing with the backing of a fascist state, black youth, Latino youth. I will condemn ICE that has dragged a woman out of a cancer brain tumor patient out of the hospital into detention. That is violence of the state. And if you guys can't distinguish between violence of the state, violence backed up with authority, and masses of people standing up, then I'm sorry for you.
What about violence against...
Okay, right here in the middle. Go ahead, man.
I have a little bit of a different question. So
you guys are refuse fascism, and I very much buy a lot of the stuff you guys talk about. How I do think that Trump regime is one of the most authoritarian regimes that we've seen in this country in over a century. I never do not buy. I do not really partake in the ideals of communism that you all sorts about. And you did say that like you are open to working with a lot of people who it's not a communist organization, right? But a lot of the responses that you actually
the United States Communist Party right here.
But a lot of the responses you've been giving so
Go ahead, let him speak.
Shut up! So the responses that you've been giving to a lot of the questions, you like use a lot of anti-capitalist rhetoric to give responses. As someone who is very willing to refuse fascism, I'm not going to fight it, I do not want to use any sort of violence. What techniques or tips or recommendations you have in ways that I can help refuse fascism without taking up arms or without stopping people, without preventing other people from using free speech. I still want to fight this use of fascism.
Okay, so he said that a lot of what I've said about the Trump regime, he would agree with. It's the most authoritarian regime. It's very horrifying. I'm paraphrasing. But he's not a communist. And a lot of the answers I've given have been anti-capitalist, and they've been getting at the communist revolution. He doesn't agree with that. But I did say that Refuse Fascism is a broader organization and unites people coming from different perspectives. And so what would be my advice to him, as somebody who also wants to refuse fascism and stand up against this? What tactics, what methods, besides those of the communist revolution? Is that right?
Essentially, yes.
Okay. So it's a great question too, and I would say this. I think you characterized it accurately. I've been speaking a lot about the communist revolution because I've been getting questions about it, and I'm more than happy to talk about it. I think it's very important. But it is very important that there's no future, there's no revolution, there is no future short of revolution that is that is decent for humanity, that doesn't deal with and go through the fight that is posed right now to dislodge this regime, to drive it from power. And so we do come together. And this is something I'm putting myself to together with others, and everybody should be part of it, whether you want silent protest, whether you want this kind of protest, that kind of protest. If you don't want to live in a fascist America, we need to stand shoulder to shoulder together against this. So as for tactics, I would say this. Refusefascism.org. I encourage people to go to the website. It's got a mission statement, a call to action. I hope we have copies of it here. In it, it describes 4 things. One is that everywhere, wherever people are standing up and protesting, we need to take up the single unifying demand to drive the regime from power. And that is something that needs to be put on the map, on the agenda. People need to make that their conscious mission. Not just resisting. You don't resist fascism for 4 years and wait it out. They're remaking the laws, they're remaking the country, they're moving very rapidly. So we have to drive them out. That's number 1. You fix yourself on that. Number 2, we spread the power of no. And we spread the no all over society. And we're saying no pussy grabbing, no Muslim ban, no border wall, no deportations, no nuclear bombs, no shutdown, no fascist USA. This is something that needs to be a symbol. You've seen it probably in the protest footage around the country. It needs to be everywhere. By spreading this no, by wearing it, by spreading it, by having it in shop windows, it's part of shaping and giving definition to, a clear call rejection of the whole regime and making this seen and visible. It's part of getting organized. It's part of seeing that we're not alone. It's part of emboldening the side that needs to stand up. So spreading the no is very important. You could do that in an afternoon. Go to your local shops. You can put it in your window. You can wear it you can put it on your car. You can spread the no all over the place, and you should. Number 3, every crime this regime commits, every act it carries out, and all of its fascist hitmen and operatives, they need to be protested. They need to be confronted and stood up against. We cannot let it be normalized where, oh, it's just Trump passing another executive order banning Muslims. Oh, it's just Trump encroaching again on women's access to reproductive rights. Oh, it's just Trump threatening the media again. Every time, people need to stand up and resist, and protest takes many forms. and it should take many forms. Number 4, all of us need to be organizing and working together to organize and mobilize and get ready for the time, which we need to be fighting to make very soon, when millions can be won to go into the streets and stay in the streets. Night after night, day after day, refusing to leave and demanding that the regime be driven from power. This is what people did in South Korea not long ago. They went in the streets, and it was not a protest as usual. It was not a protest as usual. And I want to say this to people in Berkeley. I love your question. It's very important. But to people in Berkeley, to people everywhere, but to people here, not a protest as usual, where we go out and we feel comforted by being among others who think like us. I get that. It's good to be among others who think and feel like you. But we have to go out to stop them. That's also not going out and just pleading and hoping that somebody in power notices. We want them to know how we feel. We're protesting so they'll listen. We need to protest in a way that recognizes that they are not listening, they don't care. We have to stop waiting for them to listen. We have to act in a way that refuses to move until they move. We have to protest in such numbers, in the millions, and we have to be organizing for that now, so that we create the kind of massive political crisis where every faction among the rulers has to respond, and they have to drive this regime from power. It is going to be a huge fight, and we need here for people to aim for that, and not to seek comfort alone in being in Berkeley.
Okay, and in the spirit of getting organized to drive this regime from power, I want to encourage people to sign up with Refuse Fascism. You were given contact sheets on your way in. Fill them out. Leave them with the people as you leave. Okay, but stick around, because as people can see, this is a very important discussion. Okay, and we're taking people who raise their hands right here in the front. Go ahead.
I'm a student here. I'm not actually a Republican, and I'm an international student here, but I'm really fascinated by this. I'm supposed to be writing a paper on here. So, so on the topic of Milo, you seem to be doing a lot of whataboutism.
People can't hear you.
Yes, you seem to be doing a lot of whataboutism.
They still can't.
Let him speak, we'll repeat it. Just let him speak.
I'm going to hold the mic. There you go. I'm going to hold it. On the topic of Milo, you seem to be doing a lot of whataboutism. I think it's very clear that you are saying completely unrelated stuff like drone strikes in order to avoid condemning the violence and arson that night. That is the sense I'm guiding. I feel that you are basically approving. You basically approve of violence, and you approve of violence against people whom you label as fascists. A label that you use very liberally. You basically a common thing that people say is you guys basically call everyone you disagree with as a fascist. And first question, philosophically, what do you think gives you the right of custodianship over the minds of students and residents in Berkeley? What gives you the right to rob a student of the right to listen to whomever they choose? And before you say that Milo already has a mainstream platform, that has nothing to do with if I as a student would like to hear him for the first time. And on a practical ground, do you not see that Milo's reputation has been helped tremendously by the violent actions of the mobs that night? He is a troll. I don't even like Milo, but he's a troll, and he's got the best reaction he could have ever hoped for that night. That night was the night of his life, because he got a bunch of people burning stuff in Berkeley, and he got to speak to millions of Americans on Fox News instead of a couple hundred students in Berkeley. How do you not see that?
Okay, so I'm gonna take your questions starting with the last one, which is, you were saying Milo got what he wanted by being dramatically protested. And I think this is, if you zero in and all you care about is Milo, you might have a point. But if you pull back the lens and you recognize the fact that there is a fascist America being imposed, and Milo is a minion. Milo is a troll, but he's a minion, okay? He is a tool of this regime. He is a tool of this regime, and if you sit back, maybe Milo might be a little less limelight, but this fascist regime continues to march. Let's just be honest. They're not going away if you ignore them. And it doesn't really matter if Milo gets a little bump and another one gets a depression among their operatives. The question is, are we going to stop a fascist America? And there's no way that's going to happen without people standing up and driving them off the campuses and driving them out of power. And no, it's not depriving students of their right to hear him. He does have a platform, and I'm sorry if you don't want to hear that, but that's the fact. He does have a platform, and the people, look, he worked for Breitbart. Breitbart's main force is now the advisor to the president. When Milo got shut down, the president used his Twitter feed to threaten the university. This is not a minor thing. This is not some marginal figure with no power, and power does matter. When Raphael and 15 others went to Cleveland last summer during the Republican convention and exercised constitutionally protected speech and burned the American flag, and said America was never great, they were brutally assaulted and arrested. They were held preemptively in jail to keep them from being on the streets and protesting during that. And then shortly thereafter, Donald Trump used his Twitter feed not to say, oh my God, the Cleveland police are suppressing speech, we might defund them. He said, I think people who burn the flag should lose their citizenship. Okay, so let's not pretend like these rights are floating in the air. They're not. I keep coming back to, you may not like it, but I keep coming back to the fact that there is a state, there is power behind it, and there are fascists in that seat. Finally, no, he asked another question.
Can you sit down?
Oh my God. Okay, so he asked one other question which I want to speak to because this gets thrown around. He asked one other question, which was, he suggested, and I've heard this suggestion before, that people like me just call anybody I disagree with a fascist.
That's right, you do.
That's not true. That's not true. Fascism is a scientific term. Hold on. Fascism. Fascism is a scientific term.
You know, for people, I'm sorry, for people that claim to care about free speech, you have been consistently disrupting her over and over again, okay? And you need to be quiet and let her speak. Thank you.
Right here. I didn't step up. I didn't do a single thing to you, and you all reacted. Why are you
let her speak.
I am. All I did was walk up.
We're about to answer, she was about to answer the last question that he raised. Can you please let her answer that?
Look at the difference though. People interrupting you versus violence. All I had to do was walk forward to get that reaction. Imagine if I brought a mob with sticks and just busted your head. And who here was out there? On April 15th. Who here was April 15th?
Okay.
Okay, so this man just said all he had to do is walk towards the front of the room and people stood up. What, he should have the right to come up and physically intimidate or assault somebody? You think that that's a suppression, that you stop from approaching the front of the room? Excuse me. That's not the fact. Now, you can sit down. Everybody can sit down.
It's okay, yes.
And these accusations being blurted out, it's just lunatic back there. Come on, this woman, I don't know what you're screaming about. But I'm going to answer his question. I'm going to answer his question, which is, what is, when I say the word fascism, am I just name calling? No, I am not. Fascism is a form of capitalist dictatorship. It's a form of rule that discards democratic rights and protections which have traditionally been afforded. It completely obliterates the freedom of the press. It suppresses the ability of people to speak out and dissent and protest. It criminalizes opposition. Fascism has real meaning. And no, this country has committed many crimes. I was just talking about, I was part of this when we burned the flag. Committed many crimes. I believe America has never been great. Now, I'm not speaking for everybody and refuse fascism when I say that, but I believe America was never great. From slavery, through genocide, through the Iraq War, through the genocidal war in Vietnam, through the death squads in Guatemala and Honduras, America was never great. But I have not said that America was fascist until the Trump regime is in power. This regime is fascist because they are taking a sledgehammer to traditional democratic rights.
So which communist country has been great then?
Alright, so...
Okay, so let's get a show of hands. The guy in the far back with the pen has had your hand up for a while. Go ahead, man.
I'm trying to show who you are.
I hate to ask a non-emotionally charged question and get back on topic, but
okay, hang on one sec. You know, we're going to have to ask you to leave, okay? We're going to have to ask you to leave because you're disrupting this event. People that want to hear this event. People made time to be here. Please sit down or you're going to have to leave, okay? And go ahead.
Censorship of all types has a track record of amplifying messages that it originally seeks to suppress. It's like fighting a fire with gasoline. I never would have heard of J.D. Salinger, NWA, or Milo Yiannopoulos if they weren't censored in some way. So putting aside all arguments of whether it's right or righteous, what makes us think that it's going to work this time, and what does it matter if it's right or righteous if it's not going to work?
Okay. So he said that censorship has a bad track record in every circumstance, and that even if it's right and righteous, it always has the effect of amplifying the voice that was attempted to be suppressed. And you gave the example of J.D. Salinger, Public Enemy,
NWA.
NWA, you're right, NWA, and Milo Yiannopoulos, and said you never would have known what any of those were except for the fact that they were censored. Am I characterizing you correctly?
Yes.
So even if it's righteous to stand up against somebody like Milo, is it effective? Now, I would say that it is not the case that censorship always has the impact of amplifying that which was censored. In the cases of NWA, what song are you talking about? Fuck the police?
Fuck the police.
Fuck the police? Fuck the police, and I remember better another example of Cop Killer, which was another song around the same time.
Ice-T.
That was Ice-T when he went solo.
No, I know. It was Ice-T, thank you. We got the authorities in the audience. I'm just telling you, I'm bringing it up because I remember the battle around it much better. The fact was, it was a huge fight. It was a huge fight to make that something that threw back in their faces. People had to put a lot of money and a lot of resources, a lot of energy. And there's a lot of music. There's a lot of art. There's a lot of radical thinkers that never have seen the light of day because of that kind of censorship. It does not always boomerang first, number one. And especially, once again, if you are going up against entrenched power, it is very often the case that that does not happen. Now, certain times with Fuck the Police, that hit such a nerve. It spoke so deeply to the lived experience and the fury that was pent up in so many that there was a lot of people with an appetite for it. And so there was a basis for that to be fought out. But it was not a guarantee. It is not first A, then B. First you get censored, then you get big. That is actually not what usually happens. Second, with these people, and I'll repeat, with the people like Milo, with the people who have the backing of the state and connections to the state, they actually are imposing their will whether you stand up against them or not. It is a myth. They said this about they've said this about every group. Nazis, ignore them. They'll go away. It does not work that way. They were in power. People had to stand up and confront them. And here Donald Trump and his intellectual hitmen like David Horowitz, his, the trolls like Milo, these people and people who think like them are shaping policy and imposing it. I'll say David Horowitz, one of the people who was coming to this campus, one of his proteges, Stephen Miller, is the one who helped craft the Muslim ban. He's in the White House. He's one of the senior advisors. He came out after the court stopped the Muslim ban. He came out and said, soon our enemies will see that Donald Trump's power is substantial and will not be questioned. And he said that they're going to, the courts are not supreme. Never mind the fact that their name is literally the Supreme Court. Okay? He said they're not supreme. These people are shaping policy. So the idea that if you sit down and you don't give them the attention they want, that they'll go away or they won't get big, they are huge. And they are zeroing in on humanity. And the only thing that we have to rely on, the only thing that we can do as a recourse is to mobilize masses of people who do not want to live in that fascist America to stand up against it. To stand up against it, to shut it down, to drive it out, and through doing set an example where other people take the same lead. And then you could get a dynamic where there's a lesson with Fuck the Police, where people stand up and say, I want this, I'm blasting it out the windows, and other people hear about it and do the same. We need not just to drive a Milo off campus, but we need to set off a culture Right now, we need to do what the German people should have done when Hitler came to power. We need to lead people to stand up against these fascists whenever they are on the march, wherever they are spouting their poison, whenever they come and try to toxify and poison the minds of young people on the campuses and intimidate the people who stand up and protest. We need people standing up and saying it's right to stand up, and we need more people having their backs when they do that. And that needs to set off across the country and all over the world. If we do that, all over the world, people will take hope. People will take hope, and people will celebrate. And if we sit back, their lives are being destroyed, and the future is being destroyed. And there's no avoiding it. We either fight it or we lay down for it. Those are the choices.
Really?
All right, right here with the glasses in the back. Go ahead. Yeah, you. Can you speak up?
I wanted to highlight a point of common ground that was actually achieved earlier. There was a gentleman here who talked about how the woman that laughed at Jeff Sessions' session, and she was arrested, and then he said that that was unconstitutional. But he was posing a question to you that seemed opposite to your view. So one, I want to highlight that that was a point of common ground that was achieved. Second, I want to ask you a question. I want to ask you to compare and contrast the situation of the woman who laughed, which is an involuntary free expression, versus an edited speech that was going to be given on campus by Coulter or Milo Yiannopoulos. I'm kind of already doing the work that I'm asking you to do in my question, but could you just compare the power dynamics of those two instances so that we can understand how they're different cases?
Okay. The first part of the question was trying to establish that you thought there was some common ground between me and this young man who asked a question earlier about doesn't the Constitution guarantee everybody the right to speak? And I hate to say it, but I don't think that was a point of common ground. I think that was a point of illusion and fact. Meaning this, he was saying, look, you don't need to stand up and defend the rights of people to speak. It's already enshrined, it's already protected. And I was giving the example of this woman who was arrested for laughing as a factual evidence that that is just not the case.
She wasn't arrested for laughing.
That it just wasn't the case.
She protested being dragged out of there.
That it just wasn't the case. It just wasn't the case. And you know what? There are many examples. There are many examples.
She wasn't arrested for laughing. She was arrested
we got it.
as they were dragging her out. She protested very loudly, and that's why she was arrested.
How dare you not like being physically assailed by law enforcement for giggling in a hearing? Okay, so this was actually a difference. This was me saying, and it's important. This was me saying, look, the right to speak is an important right that should be protected, especially for those who are challenging entrenched authority and the state. And the fact is that is not how it's applied. It's not how it's applied every day in the streets. It's not how it's applied every day in the communities of the oppressed. It's not how it's applied at protests around the country. And it's not how the laws are being rewritten right now to criminalize dissent, including Donald Trump toying with changing the First Amendment and opening up libel laws. So that's point one. The second thing that you asked was if I could compare the example where the woman was arrested in the Jeff Sessions confirmation hearing for an involuntary response, which is laughter, as compared to Coulter, who gives an edited, prearranged, thought-through speech on a campus, right? Well, I think there's the distinction that you make about one is involuntary, a laugh, which is, it's crazy for somebody to be assaulted and arrested for that. It's outrageous. But the other thing is, it is the power dynamic, and I think you were indicating that too. She was part of protests that were saying we should not have an unreconstructed white supremacist as the head of the Justice Department. She was there as part of protesting that at the very moment that the full force of the Senate was confirming him.
She was with Code Pink, by the way.
And when Ann Coulter comes to campus, look, Ann Coulter brags that she shaped Trump's immigration policy. She was in constant or frequent correspondence with his campaign Lewandowski, with one of his campaign chiefs. You know, she was helping advise on this. She's not somebody who has got no connection to power. And so when people who do not have state power stand up against her and shut her down, not using the authority of the state, not arresting her, not imprisoning her, but using their voices and their bodies to shut down her speaking event, I think that's righteous. And it's not only righteous, it's very important.
It only cost Berkeley $300,000.
Okay, all the way in the back with your hand in, go ahead.
Mark Jane. So I had a question.
Yeah.
And that's, most, I'm not to go to historical here, but most communist, socialist revolutions, there's been an armed component. You know, I could go into it about, you know, Rojava currently has an anarchist enclave in Rojava, and they, you know, there's been arms that have been internationally sent over. Frankly, the left doesn't really have much in the way of arms. They're concentrated on posts, and people of color are continuously arrested and they acquire arms for self-defense. So I know that you previously put the NRA sort of in the negative light, but isn't there also history, especially with communists, of using useful idiots? So that, you know, if you're going against the police power of the United States, the vast power there is, it's not that you can't do it, but if you're completely unarmed or you're trying to like overturn cop centers, and cops probably aren't going to be with us. I just don't see how without a mass gathering of arms, which the NRA would help, and you know, the engines of capitalism will be its own destruction if you want to go with arms. I'm just not sure why they're on the bad side as opposed to being useful idiots.
Okay, so that's a really multi-layered, complex question. Let me see if I can characterize it for the live stream. I'm just going to tell you, I'm not going to do it justice. I'm going to get to the essence of it, okay? So I characterize the NRA as part of the bad guys. And he's posing, but doesn't a revolution include an uprising, which would include violence? And so isn't it wrong to say that guns should be restricted? He's saying with effective arms. Let me just make this point. Let me make this point. One, for the strategy for an actual revolution, I really encourage people to look at, there's a pamphlet, a piece, that is how we could win, how we could really make revolution, that speaks to some, it's actually outside on the table, that speaks to the strategy when you have a revolutionary crisis, not today, when you have a revolutionary crisis and overthrowing the system is the order of the day. It talks about what is the strategy for a smaller force to go up against the state and overthrow it and defeat it. And what is the fighting strategy? It's very relevant to the question you're asking. As for the NRA, let me make this distinction. I am not somebody who thinks that people don't have the right to defend themselves or to bear arms. That's a right I'm not opposed to. I am opposed to the NRA because if you go to their website, if you look at what they preach, if you look at what they're about, they are a white supremacist organization. They are a reactionary organization. As an institution, I'm not saying every gun owner or every single NRA member is, but as an institution, there's no getting around that. There's just no getting around that.
What is the fact that Stalin invited over people to man the factories so that they could have the fighting force that they brought to World War I and especially World War II. I mean, that is the principles, as far as I remember, of communism, which is using the tools of capitalism against itself. You know, and gathering those things using capital because people will lend you money, and so you can have an asymmetric advantage by having them loan you things and then turn the tools on them. So it seems to me like there's political force that can be used as jujitsu.
All right, let's get some more. You've had your hand up in the purple for a while. Go ahead.
Thank you. I have a question, and then before you answer it, I'll give you the comment I have. Do you agree that the incredible tragedy of homelessness and displacement of people from their homes is an example of the hideousness of capitalism?
Yes. Would I agree? I'm just repeating it.
Before you.
Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to make a comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
The whole thing. My comment is that many of the people in Berkeley work very hard to elect a nonpartisan, progressive leadership, and one of the main priorities in our city is to build housing, to house the homeless, and to stop displacement of people who are losing their homes. Our city budget needs to go
to this main priority. Many of us are upset that so much of our city budget is going to police overtime as we see men brawling against each other in Civic Center Park.
Okay, so the first, I'm going to repeat both parts. The first question is, would I agree that the travesty of homelessness and people being displaced is a product and outgrowth of capitalism? And I would say yes, definitely. Under capitalism, housing, like everything else, is something that is available to those who have the money to afford it, and it will be rented to you or sold to you if somebody can make a profit off of selling it to you. And homes will be demolished. People will be evicted, and we saw a lot of this a few years ago, and it's still going on. People were evicted and homes were demolished because people couldn't pay their mortgages. And black people in particular, and black women in particular, were targeted in this way. And the houses were left empty and demolished because somebody couldn't make a profit off of them. So I absolutely agree. And then there's the way that a lot of people who needed other kinds of services, mental health services, other kinds of services, and have no ability to get the care and the help they need to live in a self-sufficient way. So there's a lot of causes which, yes, are rooted in capitalism for homelessness. So that's one thing. Then she made a comment.
Where's she going? Hey.
All right.
Don't touch him. Don't touch him. Stop touching him. Okay, you already do that. You've got your own eyes here, taking pictures of everybody here. Trying to ID people that are here. Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
I'm wearing this because you guys are going to dox me, aren't you?
We want to actually continue this event.
I can't wait for the death threats to come because I'm wearing my pink mask and I am with Coat Pink.
Okay.
How dare you use our brave, courageous actions? Fuck you.
Okay, if you would like this event to continue and to have this important discussion continue, which is why we're all here today, and as we can see from the character of the questions and her responses to it, this is an extremely urgent conversation to have with big stakes for humanity. So please, if everyone can be quiet, sit in your seat. If you can stop disrupting. Okay, let's.
Get out of my face.
Let's just.
So I'm gonna.
Tell them to sit down.
The question that was asked. The question that was asked, and it's a question that's come up in different forms tonight. I think it's worth responding to. Is after her comment about homelessness, which I think is an important comment, she said that she and others in Berkeley worked very, very hard to elect somebody who's nonpartisan and who would pay attention to providing more housing for the homeless. For the whole, pardon me? A whole city council. Okay, correction. A whole city council that would do this. And that she's very disturbed that so much of the city's budget is now being forced to go to police these protests and forces who are coming to fight in Berkeley. Now, let me say this. Look, the problem of homelessness is a real problem and it does need resources. But I think this is a false dichotomy and it's the wrong one to pit them against each other.
You're not going to talk about the police costs, are you?
I am going to talk about the police costs. I am going to talk about the police costs. They are coming because there are fascist militia groups amassing and marching on Berkeley. And if they weren't marching on Berkeley, I'm sorry, I've seen them march in Mississippi. And that's no better. And the people of Berkeley, hold on. The people of Berkeley, oh my God, would you please be quiet? Everybody's heard your shit, okay? Everybody's heard it. Oh my God. It's too much at a certain point, people. You guys are acting like you're four. Only it's crazy. It's crazy. I'm answering the question you're screaming at me, okay? Here we go. Here we go. It would be just as much. If you're with me, let's all say, I'm with you right now. I'm with you.
I'm with you.
Are you with me?
I'm with you.
Are you with me?
I'm with you.
Okay, so I'm going to speak now. Oh, goodness.
Okay, we're going to have to ask you to leave. Okay, you have repeatedly disrupted this event over and over again. Someone that supposedly cares about free speech won't let her respond, so we're asking you to leave.
She asked. I'm literally answering your question and you're screaming at me to answer it.
That's the question.
I'm speaking about it. I'm speaking about it. You know what? If the fascists were marching somewhere else, it would be just as important for the people of Berkeley to stand up against it. And I will tell you, there are some things that are more important than local politics. There are many things. The fate of humanity. I'm sorry, American lives are not more important than other people's lives. We need to get rid of a system that causes homelessness, but you are not going to do it if you sit back and let the fascists put a chill on Berkeley.
What brings out the police? It could be nonviolent. They don't need to be brawling and hitting each other.
Look, she's saying they don't need to be kicking each other in the park. But you know what? I'm sorry. Oh man, you guys. I don't know. I have to say, when the Nazis were taking over Germany, that's the issue in the order of the day. When the fascist regime is taking over this country, that is the primary issue of the day. And everybody needs to put your attention to that. Everybody needs to put your attention to that. And I don't care about the budget of Berkeley when it comes to stopping a fascist America. I don't. I don't, and you shouldn't either. You shouldn't either.
Okay, you're not only disrespecting her, you're disrespecting everyone in this room that wants to hear this event, okay? So I'm going to call on this brother right here in the front in the white t-shirt. Listen, go ahead.
I just want a clarification on the previous points.
Somebody who's mellow.
Did you say that people like MLK and Gandhi did or did not make fundamental change?
Did not.
Yeah. They made major changes. They were part of major changes, but fundamental changes, no. That's why I quoted MLK's speech, where he said that there's never been a country that is more guilty of violence, purveying violence than America at that very hour. He gave that speech 50 years ago. And America since then, America killed 2 million in Vietnam. It killed 3 to 5 million in Korea. It killed many in death squads. It's gotten more violent. It's gotten more decimated. And this is, no, these are lies you're saying. I'm sorry. And you're not even the one who's being called on. So.
Okay, I want to call on the woman with your hand up right there. You've had it up for a while. Go ahead.
So, I'm a little bit confused because you say that the revolution needs to be communism and that that's where we're going to be progressive. But to me, so far, I've just been hearing, you know, fascism because so far you've been oppressing, concluding that it is okay to oppress leaders and that it is okay to assume that everyone who is conservative or Republican are, you know, they're all white supremacists, which technically you are taking away my identity as a Hispanic woman, which is oppressive. So I want to know, what is the difference between your your communist thinking and your fascism, which, by the way, you're using to oppress my identity so far. So could you please explain how oppressing my identity is okay, but you're a communist and that you don't use oppression, because so far you have been.
Okay, so here's somebody who doesn't understand oppression and what it means. Okay? Oppression is not you run the state. You pass the laws. You are rounding up and terrorizing immigrants. You are snatching a father from in front of his daughter going to school. You're doing that, and then you come and you want to give one speech and some students won't let you do it. That's not oppression. That's not oppression.
So you're oppressing my identity as a Hispanic woman, saying that I am, because I'm Republican, I am automatically a white supremacist. So technically you are taking away...
No, you know what? You are lying right now. You are lying and distorting what I said. When I answered, wait a second, this woman here asked the question. Now, I know you didn't agree with me. Yeah, she asked, do I think that all Trump supporters are racist?
No, my question...
No, hold on.
My question is...
Oh my God.
That was not my question. My question was, what is the difference between you being a communist and preaching all these communist values when really you are acting as a fascist who is oppressing my identity as an Hispanic woman, taking away my identity. I am a white supremacist.
once again, oppression is dominant forces. So hold on. No.
You asked your question, let her respond, okay?
All right, so here we have a perfect example where somebody thinks that oppression is not being able to do everything they want, anytime they want, and run over other people. That's not oppression. That's not oppression. That's not oppression. It's not oppression. Oh my God. You know what? No.
Really important to get out.
No, you don't
No, you don't get to do that, okay? She asked a question she's responding to. You can leave if you just want to keep disrupting, okay?
Okay.
Now, I did not.
People trying to have conversations like you think you should have. Hit on the head with white locks. Attack.
Nobody is hit on the head here.
But you're acting.
You need to shut up and sit down.
Thank you.
You need to shut up and sit down. Now, she asked a question. Do you want him to yell or do you want to hear your answer?
Let me answer his question about the bike lock. You support people getting assaulted with bike locks for trying to. That's what this is about.
I am answering. Listen, first of all, let me just set the record straight on this. I did not say shit about you. I didn't. It's not about you.
All people now are Trump supporters who voted for Trump are white supremacists.
That's not what I said. That's not what I said. I said, let me repeat myself. Let me repeat myself to all you young Republicans, and this I do mean towards you. This I do direct at you. Okay? I did not say every Trump supporter is a white supremacist. I said every Trump supporter is okay with a white supremacist in the White House. Fact.
Yes.
Every Trump supporter is okay with a sexual predator in chief. Every Trump supporter is okay with having a president who told a crowd of his supporters, I'd like to punch those protesters in the face. Now, all these people, you want a condemnation of violence against protesters? Take it to Donald Trump.
Yes.
Take it to Donald Trump.
You're talking about an innocent person who is standing in the middle of a crowd.
I'm talking about a president with his finger on a nuclear trigger, and you think that's an arbitrary distinction. It's not. No, it's not an arbitrary distinction.
What are you talking about? Innocent people who were assaulted in the name of what you claim as like some kind of revolution. You clearly endorse violence against people that you disagree with.
That's not the case. You're impugning a lot of things. You're impugning a lot of things.
Kill millions of people. That's what you're talking about.
I'm talking about driving out a fascist regime, and when I talk about revolution, I'm talking about putting an end to a system that has enslaved and tortured and murdered tens of millions.
Okay, we're going to have one more question, all right? Right here. Go ahead.
So I believe in peaceful protest. I believe when you add violence, there's no longer a place for a true discussion. And I think that's what happened in this room tonight. We are adding violence to our speech, and therefore we are no longer having a discourse, or nothing is being accomplished here. And I think that that's the problem with adding violence to either side of the coin. And I think that there are people that are intentionally coming to what would otherwise be peaceful protests and inciting violence, so that it can be propagandized on the media, and so that people who would otherwise agree with the protests are then against them. What do you think about that?
Okay, so she's saying, bear with me so I get this right. You're saying that you believe in peaceful protest, that you're concerned that when violence is added to the equation from either side, it degrades the conversation. It makes conversation impossible, and that's some of what you're observing in this room tonight. And what was the last thing you said?
And I believe that violence is being intentionally added for that purpose, to turn people away from what they would normally support the protests, or then no longer support it, and it becomes more divisive.
And that violence is sometimes being intentionally added to protests in order to actually turn people off to the purpose of those protests. Is that correct? So, these are important questions. Look, I want to make clear, because there's been distortions, I've not been advocating violence tonight. I've not been advocating violence. I've been condemning the violence of the state, and I've been refusing to play games with people who want to characterize and mischaracterize righteous protest and shutting down of fascists as violence. So that's one thing. Number two, I do think, though, it's important to say that people, look, resistance takes many forms. And nonviolent protest is a very important part of that form. And people who are pacifists, I will stand shoulder to shoulder with. I do not think that's the only form of protest. I don't think everybody has to be a pacifist. I think that people have the right to self-defense. And I think, no, there's a difference between making there's a difference between saying in what circumstances people have the right to defend themselves and use violence. There's a difference between saying that and advocating acts of violence.
Isn't that what they did on the Patriots Day?
Oh my God, she asked a question, man. She asked a question and it's a good question. The last part of her question is, aren't there people who intentionally come in and try to incite and provoke violence to undermine the purpose of the protest? And I will tell you, there's a long history of this, especially from the state, to send in provocateurs, infiltrators, people to actually undermine protesters and get people set up and get people in prison. And there's a lot of cases that are actually going through the courts right now. People who protested against the Republican convention years ago in Minneapolis, who were set up by police agents, who were enticed into doing things, or to even talking about things that they weren't part of. And it's a very big danger. It's a very big danger. And it is why I don't advocate acts of violence as parts of these protests. It is why people have to have principles. And look, here's the thing. The only way to stop a fascist America, is through masses of people. Not through individual acts of violence or disgust.
You are the black bloc.
It is through massive. I am not the black bloc. Oh my God, you think that I'm allowing and conducting that? Listen, you guys need to talk to the black bloc. They don't listen to communists for their leadership, okay? Having said that, I'm going to finish your question. Wait a second, I know you're really persevering. Having said that, I want to say that most of the black bloc, I believe, have their hearts in the right places. I'm not here to say yes or no about them. But I'm here to say that what it's going to take to stop a fascist regime is masses of people. It's going to take the kind of mass outpourings where people come out. Yes, those who want to stand on the front lines and not back down when the police come at them. And yes, the people who want to come out with their strollers and their grandmothers and their friends and their family and stand together. And we need a movement that embraces and unites people from all walks of life. Those who will be in the streets, those who will use their public platforms, there's celebrity, their voices of conscience in different ways to condemn what's going on. It is going to take millions. And so we need to work together as we do this. I think it's very important. I'm glad you asked the question. And we have to do this. I'm going to end with this. Listen, to all y'all who persevered, to all y'all who wanted to, and especially you who asked the question at the end, who persevered because you are concerned and you're alarmed at what's being done in this country to people, to immigrants, to Muslims, to women, to people around the world. If you are concerned about that, I am glad you came out. I'm glad you persevered, and you should stick around and we should talk. And we should strategize. We should get organized. We should learn from each other where we disagree. We should debate that out, but we should stand shoulder to shoulder. And I will say to those of you who came to disrupt and shut down, you know, I don't know what to tell you, but we're going to do our best to create a world where you don't get to run shit. All right.
And thank you to Sunsara Taylor.